Well, good morning. Welcome to Debbie's Back Porch. So glad to have you with us. I need to clarify before I start cooking today, I'm not Greek. In all of my ancestry, you won't find a single Greek. But I love Greek food. And that's partially due to a lovely Greek lady named Alexandra George. She's the mother of a really good friend of mine, Don George, and she used to bless us with homemade Greek food at our office. And I want to thank my friend Don for helping me research and get some tips from his family on making Tiropita. Tiropita is a savory cheese pie, not sweet at all. It's not exactly like Mrs. George, but my friend Don has declared me an honorary Greek chef. So let me share this recipe with you. But first, let me give you a quick reminder. We love it when you subscribe to our channel. And if you like our videos, give us a thumbs up. It means a lot to me. So let's talk about ingredients. Even among Greek yayas, you're going to find lots of variations on the cheeses and the herbs that are used. So I'll talk a little about the different cheeses as we go along. This is phyllo dough. I have made phyllo dough once in my life, and I like you guys, but I don't like anybody well enough to actually make it from scratch again. It's really hard. So I bought this. We're going to have a cup of feta cheese. I have here, I'll have a cup of Gruyere, which is not a Greek cheese. A cup of Keflotyri cheese, which is a Greek cheese. The dough, when you buy one pack, is enough for a big pie. I have cottage cheese and cream cheese. We'll talk about herbs later. So just for this recipe, when I say a cup, I mean a cup by volume, not 8 ounces by weight. And I say that because in order to test the capacity of my pan, I used volume, and I don't want to overrun my pan. Now I'm using Gruyere in replacement of a Greek cheese called Keflotyri. I may not be pronouncing it right, but it's about $20 a pound, and I just didn't have that. So I'm trying Gruyere, and you can use any kind of a creamy cheese. You could use a Cheddar. You could use a Jack. In choosing your cheese, you want to use a couple of really creamy cheeses, and then this Keflotyri, which is more like Parmesan, and it's very, very salty. So a better choice for my creamy cheese would probably have been Havarti or even Cheddar, because they're not quite so salty. And the finished product using this cheese combination was pretty salty. Not too salty, but pretty salty. And you'll notice that I don't add any salt to this recipe. All the salt you need is in your cheeses. And let me clarify for you the reason that I am substituting cheeses and not using totally the original Greek cheeses. This Keflotyri, you can substitute Parmesan. You want to grate it yourself. You don't want to put a cup of the little green thing. But the Keflotyri costs $15 a pound, and the Keflotyri could cost $20 a pound. So I'm going to use my food processor here now that everything is measured out. I'm putting in 1 egg, and I'm going to start with the cottage cheese. And with this cottage cheese, you want to drain it. You want to drain any excess liquid off before you start. So I'm starting with the creamy cheese and just 1 of the eggs. And we're going to, I may not have mentioned the eggs. I'll list all the ingredients in the info section. So I'm going to cream that up together so that we've got a good start on getting everything creamed together. And then I'm going to add 1 of the creamy cheeses. As I'm blending all this up in the food processor, I'll share with you that there is another completely different method for doing this. And I've looked, because I've researched before I make a new dish, I've looked at probably 20 different videos and recipes for making the Tiropita, and a few, not most, but a few of the recipes start with making a roux and then adding your cheese and then tempering in your eggs. I may try that another time, but most people just mixed it all up together and used with the eggs, and they do not make a roux, a bechamel with the flour and the butter and milk. So I'll try that another time, but this turned out really great. I'm putting in cream cheese now. That was an 8-ounce package of cream cheese, and that was a measured cup of cottage cheese, drained. And we're going to mix all that up. So if you're keeping track, I have 5 cups, mostly by volume. It was just an 8-ounce package of cream cheese, but 5 cups of different cheeses. If you're following a Greek recipe from a Greek cookbook, it's going to give you the measurements in grams, and then you would weigh it before you grate it. But this is a simplification. It's much easier to measure, and it's easier if you're doing this for the first time and you're trying to figure out what size pan to use. If you do it in cups, you know you want to use a pan that will hold at least 5 cups of cheese and the eggs and the herbs. So that'll be easy for you to figure out in your kitchen which of your pans you want to use and designate it your Tiropita pan. So all of that's in, and I'm really going to blend this well. I want it to all mix up, and I'm going to add more eggs as I go along as it mixes. So the recipe has a total of 4 eggs, the one that I started with, and I'll add 3 more. And you don't need to watch all of that, so I'll be back. So I've blended that all together for 2 or 3 minutes. And you know you can do it with a mixer. You could do it with a great big spatula, but I really wanted to get it really creamy. And so I used my food processor. Now we're going to prepare our olive oil for brushing. And what I have here is just some extra virgin olive oil with a little garlic powder in it. And the garlic powder is optional. I just like the flavor of garlic, so there you go. We're going to get our pan ready and our phyllo dough ready, our sheets. And I'm going to start by brushing my pan with this olive oil mixture. And this does 2 things, of course. It makes it come out of the pan easy. But putting the oil on the bottom of the pan actually helps keep the bottom crust crispy and flaky. And we want the bottom to be very crispy and flaky, just like the top. So I start out with a little olive oil. And I don't have a lot of room on my counter, so I have to move stuff around. But here's your phyllo sheets, and you want to take them out of the fridge right before you get ready to start. And since I've made this video, I've learned some tips about handling this dough, because it's very, very fragile and it will fall apart. When you get a pack, you have lots in it. But I learned a tip that I didn't do in this video, but I'll tell it to you, is that when you first take them out, if you put them for a few minutes between 2 damp towels, then your phyllo sheets won't tear as much. Now, my sheets are not quite big enough for my pan, and they will tear, and that's okay, because we're going to put many, many layers. And what I'm going to do is just offset the layers to make sure that it comes up all the way around on all 4 sides to the top of the pan. So I'll put one a little to the right and the next one a little to the left. But we're going to put, I didn't do it between each one because, as I say, they were too small. But we're going to put brush more of the olive oil with a tiny little bit of garlic in it. And you could see the tiny little bit of garlic was 1/2 teaspoonful. And if you'll see, I'm just kind of placing it so that it comes up on one side with one sheet and on the other side with the other sheet. And then I'll brush it with the olive oil. Now we're going to put about 10 sheets of these phyllo sheets in this pan, kind of offset so that we get it to come up all the way around the sides. I'll let you see it just a little bit so you can get an idea of how very fragile this dough is. And, you know, as I said, just as an experiment, one time I made phyllo sheets and it took all day long just to make a few, and and a lot of muscle power to get them thin, and I never was able to get them this thin. So if my homemade one was of better quality, I would maybe try it again, but it wasn't. These sheets that you buy in the grocery store are better quality than what I could make at home, so I will forevermore buy them. So you'll see what I'm doing. I'm just putting down a sheet or two offset, and then I'm brushing it with the olive oil. When I get that done, I'll be back. So I ended up using 12. I know they look kind of messy. I'm going to make it neater, and I'm going to pour in my filling. Now, we didn't talk about herbs, and I added, which you didn't see, 2 tablespoons full of chopped cilantro. I put it in the blender at the end. And I see people use a variety of herbs. The most traditional, I think, is a blend of mint and dill. I have seen folks use cilantro. I have seen folks just use parsley. The cilantro turned out wonderful. But next time when I have it, I will use a mixture of mint and dill. And that would be 2 tablespoons each if you're using fresh, and 1 teaspoon each if you're using dry. So what you don't see over to the side is I'm tasting for salt, and it definitely does not need salt. So I'm sorry, my camera's shaky today. I apologize. I'll have to work on that. So now I'm just going to pour this in, and you'll see it's very firm with the 4 eggs have made it very firm. Now, I can't tell you what the texture would be like if you did the bechamel sauce with it, but it couldn't be any firmer than this. And I'm just going to pour this in and spread it out, and you can see the texture, and I'll be right back. So I'm just working on it now to get it, to spread it out and get it pretty even. I may have a little bit more over here I'm going to put in. And when I get this in, we're going to start the layering of the phyllo sheets all over again. Be back again. So this is ready for the top crust. And I'll remind you again, if I had put these between 2 clean damp towels, they would be sturdier and easier to handle. But all those little tears that you see in there, once we put 10, 12 of these little layers on there, nobody will ever notice them. They'll just all cook together and be the most glorious flakes. So I'll put these on. I'm putting 2 offset, and then I will brush them with the olive oil and garlic again. And when that's all done, oh, by the way, I'm preheating my oven to 375. So I want it to be good and hot when we put this in. When I put it in, I will set it on a lower than normal rack setting. I have moved my rack down to very close to the bottom of the oven. And part of that, and that is partly to make sure that our bottom crust gets good and crispy. So this will be baked for 40 minutes in a 375 oven. My oven is a little low on its thermometer, Most recipes will call for 350. You'll have to make adjustments for your oven. You know your oven. I know my oven. I'm cooking it at 375. I'll be right back. Okay, I have put 12 more sheets on top, and I'm just going around where they're not exactly the same, and kind of folding them under and pinching. This is not like dough. This is very dry. They won't pinch together. I'm just sort of pushing them down and evening them up so that I won't have little pieces breaking off in the oven, and it'll look somewhat neater at the end. But this dough is just not like any other, or these sheets, they're not like any other dough you work with. I have seen people actually make this with puff pastry, but puff pastry is different. That's not really what you use in this. You use the phyllo sheets, and they're different. Now what I'm doing is just dropping a little water just on my fingers across the top. I really don't know the reason for that. I know everybody does it, and my understanding is that it helps it steam a little bit on top and makes your crust crispier. That's a guess on my part. All I can tell you for sure is that everybody sprinkles a little water on top. Now before we put this in the oven, we want to score the top of it, which is just a kind of a traditional thing to do. And you can use a razor blade. I've got a ceramic knife here. You don't want to score it deeply. You're just going to make a triangle design, and you're really just cutting through maybe the top 2 or 3 layers of the phyllo sheets. You don't want to cut all the way down to the cheese. You're just making an impression more than anything else. And this is another one of those things. I don't know why it's done. I know it traditionally is always done. Because when you see this or spanakopita that's made by a Greek yaya, it's always got these triangle shapes in it. Now, many people, and I think Mrs. George's was made this way, she actually made hand pies where you lay out your phyllo with the garlic and with the olive oil and garlic if you choose, and you brush them, and then you put the filling inside, and you fold it into triangles, each one individually, until you have lots of layers of phyllo with the cheese filling inside, and you bake those. But even when it's made in a full pie like this, it has a triangle pattern on top. So in the oven, 375, 40 minutes, and this is what you have. And I am so happy with how this looks. To me, it's just gorgeous. Now you're not supposed to cut it for at least 30 minutes. An hour would be better. Full confession, I did cut it because folks were waiting to eat. But the second piece was much better than the first because it really needs the cool down time. And this is what it looks like when it's cut after an hour of cooling time. You keep your leftovers in the fridge. A lot of folks eat this for breakfast the next day. But that crust on the bottom is just as crispy as it can be. And look at that texture. Now when you look at this, you often think of like a cheesecake, but no, it's very savory. I served it with a really simple salad, lettuce and tomato with some lemon juice to top it, a little olive oil. And we had some fruit for dessert. It was a lovely meal. And while I certainly don't do this as well as Mrs. George did, I'm pretty proud of myself for a first try. It was not nearly as hard as I thought it would be. Working with the phyllo dough, it's time consuming. It takes a little time to do it, and you have to exercise a little care. But it isn't hard, and I really recommend this. I hope you give it a try. Hope you'll love it as much as I do. And I hope to see you again tomorrow on Debbie's Back Porch.